under his glove.
Uh-huh.
Then, of course, you remember pop idol David Bowie, the star that you saw on stage, was evidently just as excessive and bizarre off stage. And who better to tell us about David Bowie's eccentric lifestyle and his unconventional relations with other musicians than his ex-wife? Angela Bowie is going to be here with us today. So that'll be fun to talk with Angela, and we'll get all the latest on everybody.
Yeah.
And I'll give you all the latest on everybody in the soaps.
Welcome back to Northwest Afternoon. We are going to delve inside the music scene today and get the newest scope on a lot of your favorite artists. The hottest names in pop, rock, and country, of course, were out in force this week at the American Music Awards. And star reporter Janet Charlton was there taking notes. Janet joins us live from Hollywood via satellite to tell us about some of the bizarre behavior she witnessed, and she watches closely, we know.
And David Bowie, as you know, is a huge name in music, but he's become almost as well known for some of his offstage eccentricities. We've got the perfect person to give us the real lowdown on David Bowie. His ex-wife, Angela Bowie, is with us. Please welcome our guests. Hi, Janet. Let me start with you. You just got back. This was Monday night, the American Music Awards. Exciting night. Tell me what you saw with Michael Jackson. How did he look to you?
Well, Michael Jackson always looks peculiar to me, but the people sitting very close to him told me, interestingly enough, he was wearing pink nail polish, which is a new one on me. I mean, he's been strangely white-skinned for a long time, but that's like a new touch that I hadn't heard of before.
What about the rehearsal prior to the broadcast?
He was very strange at rehearsal, you know. He did a great number at the beginning of the show, but during rehearsal, a lot of the people that worked at the Shrine Auditorium brought their kids in to watch. And there were a couple of hundred people assembled in this huge auditorium just to watch Michael rehearse. But he freaked out and he made them send everybody home. And even the stage people, like the cameraman and the sound people, the very essential people, only they were allowed to stay, and he made them dim the lights so dark that they could barely see him. So he's like really got this weird shyness at times.
Did he make people angry by doing that?
I think that they expect weird behavior from him. I think he really disappointed a lot of the children that had come in to see him because their parents worked with probably Dick Clark Productions or had something to do with the show. So yeah, he disappointed a lot of children at that point, sure.
So Jenna, what is the deal with his skin tone? It's getting whiter and whiter all the time. He almost looked actually like a burn victim, I thought.
Yeah, sometimes he looks strangely made up, and I've heard stories that he has a skin disorder, and that's one of the reasons that sometimes his skin is acting up. It flares up on him, and he has to cover it up with makeup, and he has definite skin problems. And I know he sees a skin doctor regularly in Beverly Hills, so it could also be a physical complication.
It's interesting to go back and compare the photographs of him from even, 5 or 6 years ago, and then look at Michael today.
He was such a healthy-looking, cute little boy.
Yeah. He's doing an interview now coming up next month. It'll air on ABC with Oprah Winfrey. Tell us what you know about how this came about.
Yeah, I think, well, Michael is kind of reevaluating his career right now. He's worried because he's not doing as well as he expected to be doing now. His album is doing okay, but for him, it's not a huge sensation. And, his tour certainly wasn't a success. He had to cancel performances in Europe because they weren't sold out, and he never toured the U.S. I guess there just wasn't enough interest to make it worth it because the show is very, very expensive. So he's a little worried about things now. He's trying to get into movies. And I think that he feels that if he's on TV and he's like a gracious host to Oprah, people will think of him more in terms of a normal person and accept him in the movies because, he sees Madonna is having a hard time getting acceptance in the movies. She has such a strong personality of her own. Well, Michael, can you imagine him playing any kind of a normal character, not from outer space? So, you know what he wants to play? Listen to this. He wants to star in a remake of Cinderella, where he plays Cinderella as a man. Now, remember, Jerry Lewis did
And that's our show for today. Thanks very much.
I'm not kidding.
Let me go to you, Angela, because you met Michael when he was, hi, Janet, a teenager.
I'm glad that you're on the same show, Angela.
Yes, at last. I have to track you down and find you in Seattle.
Uh-huh.
Now, you met Michael when he was a teenager, Michael Jackson?
Yeah, I did. When we were playing the Universal Amphitheater, we were entertained by the Jacksons at their home. And he's so nice. I mean, he's a charming person. And I haven't seen him since that time, so I'm really not, I can't really comment.
Shocked by the change, though?
Not really. No, I mean, it's just like a normal person. You know, you see some woman who's very lovely and 47 or 48, and she says she's going to get a facelift, and you go, but why? You know what I mean? I think it's the same thing. You know, you get to be very successful, and you have access to enough funds and enough doctors that tell you that they can do all kinds of magical things. And for some, I don't know, maybe it's just the one thing that he's indulged himself with.
What was your sense of the Jackson family back then, Angela? Did they seem a loving and close-knit group at the time?
I wasn't really. I spent a lot of time talking to him. You have to understand, I have a son who was far smaller than Michael, but I relate very well to children, and he wanted someone to confide in, and so I just sat and talked with him, and he was telling me how difficult it was because of the Jackson 5 fame for him to date or to do anything that wasn't really, and you understand this so well from touring. You know, all he really did was go in the studio and tour and write songs and rehearse. But as far as a social life, he didn't have one. And he said that they made him say that he was younger than he was. He was like 17, and he wanted to go out, and he had to pretend to be 14.
I get a sense even now that he's a pretty lonely person in a lot of ways.
And actually, Elizabeth Taylor showed up at the Music Awards ceremony in order to present Michael with a special award. And let's take a look at that clip. Janet, what were your impressions of Elizabeth Taylor that evening? How did she seem?
My theory, yeah. As soon as she came out, it was very strange. She was walking very carefully, too stiff. Her back was totally stiff. She walked out taking baby steps, two people helping her. You could see something was wrong right away. She was almost tipping over if you'd leave her alone for a minute. And her face seemed swollen. She was like, her clothes were very tight. She sounded almost like she was in a daze. And I think, this is my theory, I think she's having really serious back problems again. You know, periodically she goes in and out of those back problems. She could have had some, you know, some cortisone or something given to her to lessen, and maybe some pain pills, I don't know, to take care of the pain in her back, because she seemed to be a little bit out of it, and she also seemed a little swollen and bloated.
Yeah, it seemed difficult for her to make that.
She wasn't at her best that night, I'll tell you. I was hoping she'd make an appearance and show us all that she was totally back to normal, but she still seems to be uncomfortable. I'm hoping she'll get better, though. We always root for the best for Liz.
All right, we'll take another short break here. Is it true that Billy Ray Cyrus's achy breaky heart is hooked on Dolly Parton? Or is that relationship merely a rumor? Janet and Angela will tell us what they know about Dolly and relationships right after this.
It's hot.
It's red hot.
It's Rogers Home Furnishings 3-day red hot sale.
With red hot prices store-wide, Friday through Sunday only.
This sofa and love seat set is only $5.99 for both pieces. Now,
So she came to us for help. Tuesday on Northwest Afternoon, watch as we try to transform some of the Northwest's most unromantic men into real-life Romeos.
We're going inside the music world today for a look at what's happening with some of our favorite artists. And we have Angela Bowie here and Janet Charlton. Janet, there's been a rumor floating around about Dolly Parton and Billy Ray Cyrus. What's the deal there? Is there a relationship, or is there not really a romance?
It wouldn't surprise me in the least. I'll tell you, Dolly likes to fool around. You know, she's been seeing her bodyguard for a long time now, ever since she did that movie with James Woods in Chicago. And I remember a stewardess from an airplane calling me up and telling me that she saw Dolly and this so-called bodyguard kissing all the way on some flight from Los Angeles to Chicago. So I know she has some kind of an arrangement with her husband back home. It's strange, but Dolly does pretty much what she wants. And I think that Billy Ray Cyrus would be a delectable little fling, and I'm sure she would do it in a minute. He seems to be available.
You actually, Angela, in your book alluded to the possibility of there being some sort of a extracurricular relationship, if you will, on Dolly's part.
Yeah, I alluded to it, but it was the kind of remark, which was very carefully vouched in terms of not trying to point any fingers. I had the great pleasure of meeting Dolly Parton at the Country Music Awards in London. And she comes and does that quite often. A guy called Nick Kahn puts it together, and it's a fabulous show. And she was too much. We had photographs taken, and they ran in Cream magazine, and she's just terrific. So I'm a big fan of hers. But how wonderful, because Billy Ray Cyrus is great. So wouldn't that be a turn up for the books?
Speaking of people named Billy, Janet, you heard some rather disturbing news about Billy Idol as of late.
Well, you know, I think he's like headed in the direction of, sometimes I think he wants to follow in the footsteps of Elvis Presley, his idol, Billy Idol's idol. But last night he was out carousing, and he and a few friends went to Tattoo in Beverly Hills, and feeling no pain and drinking a lot and having a good time. And the next thing people knew, Billy was in the parking structure, and he was having some kind of convulsions. And they had to call, his friend said, oh, don't call the police, don't call the doctor, he'll be all right, he'll be all right. Meanwhile, his eyes are rolling back, he's twitching. Finally, he starts turning blue. Luckily, the paramedics came. They attached some electrodes to him, and there was a flat line. It was like he had no heartbeat. They had to pound on him, and finally they they put the electrodes on him, and he bounced up, and he came back to life. And he seems to be okay. Oddly enough, one of his friends started going through the same convulsions in front of the club and took off all his clothes and had convulsions nude in front of the club. And the paramedics ran around to tend to him. They carted the two guys off to the hospital. The rest of the guys were in terrible shape. They got in a cab and went home. And believe it or not, Billy the next day was up and around like nothing ever happened.
Wow.
And everybody in the club thought he almost died. I mean, he was practically dead, a flat line.
Angela, do you know Billy Idol?
Yeah, I do.
So she must not be surprised, right, Angela?
Yeah, it's just so depressing. I get so depressed for all that talent just to be wasting time, you know.
He's an adorable guy, and he's doing so well. He's got a new album.
He's precious when he's like happening, and he's got this fabulous son, and the lovely Perry, who is the son's mother, and I feel so badly about it. I hope he's okay.
When you were in the midst of the whole rock and roll music scene, though, did you see other examples of that, of these young musicians seemingly bent on self-destruction?
I don't think they even have to be young. It's it's just a question of boredom. You know, some people, I really believe, are not hooked into enjoying life. And sometimes, you know, if it takes a manager or a wife or a support group or someone to just make you get out of yourself and to stop being focused solely on your career and solely on recording or singing or performing, so that, you know, you've got a life outside of it as well, so that when that's taken away from you, you don't get seriously depressed, seriously miserable, you know, or all of the above. So,
Janet, how about the relationship between Whitney Houston and her husband? What's going on there? Have you seen them recently?
Oh, yeah, I just saw Billy at the Music Awards, and let me tell you, Whitney keeps him on a very tight leash. She wants to know where he is every minute. And just to make sure she knows, she attached a beeper to him that he keeps on at all times, even when he's on stage singing. You know, he's touring now. And he sleeps with it next to his bed, and the only people that have the phone numbers to this beeper are Whitney and her doctor, in case there's some kind of a baby problem or the baby comes early or something. But it's driving him crazy, because sometimes at 4 o'clock in the morning she'll wake him up with the beeper, and he'll get all scared and panicky and call up and find out that she was just checking up on him. She wanted to find out what he was doing. So it like kind of drives him crazy. But I noticed at the award show, as soon as he walked off stage, he grabbed his cellular phone and called Whitney and checked in. So he's very concerned. They have a strange relationship. It's kind of exciting.
What about Prince? He has a new club now in L.A. Tell us about that.
Just opened, yeah, Glam Slam, just like the one in Minneapolis, where he's going to be playing a lot of music. And it's interesting because he built this little room, and in this little room, hidden behind the bar, no one has a key to the door, is a chair and a monitor. And he can sit there and watch on the monitor. Cameras are all over the club, and he can focus in on the girls that he likes. And he has like a guard standing outside of the room, and if he says, oh, I like that girl in the restaurant wearing the red dress sitting at the third table, He'll send somebody up to tell her Prince would like to meet you. And this is how he gets to meet all the girls in the club without having to get out and socialize himself.
Sooner or later, he's going to have the line, pay no attention to the man in the other room looking at the monitor. I know.
Sounds
The
like
Wizard
something out
of
of the
Prince.
60s, doesn't it?
I like high technology when it helps dating.
We're going to take a short break, Janet. We'll come back to you in just a second. David Bowie's been known to do some wild things, but did he really have a fling with Mick Jagger? Angela will fill us in when we come back.
It's King County's largest ever piano sale this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You'll find hundreds of name brand pianos, grand pianos, organs, digital pianos, and keyboards. And
Survival on Front Runners at 7 Saturday night. David Bowie, an artist who broke a lot of new ground in the field of music and rock and roll, and probably was as avant-garde a person off stage as on. I know that the two of you lived a kind of an open marriage relationship. Did it work right from the start?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we had a very good partnership for the first 6 or 7 years. The amount of time that it took to really get a lot of work done and to do what had to be done to break David internationally, because he was, when he started in England, when I first met him, he had already been working in England before he got the recording contract with Mercury Records and then went on to make Space Oddity and to actually break through. He had recorded with Polydor and D-Ram as David Jones, and so this was the part of his career that opened up for international stardom.
Do you think his openness about his bisexuality, because he came out in interviews and just declared himself, did that make it easier, do you think, for other musicians to come out in the open with their sexual orientation?
It had nothing to do with being confined to musicians, to be honest with you, love. I think it had everything to do with people in general. And David mentioned it twice in interviews. The mop-up and the backup was pretty much done by myself because I had been expelled from Connecticut College for Women for having an affair with a girl when I was 15, and I got off lightly. I got expelled. She was institutionalized by the university and by her parents, and for 4 years was kind of at their mercy and you know, was being treated for this quote-unquote affliction. So that, and the reason I point that out is because it's a gender and an identity crisis thing that we were dealing with for all people, not just for musicians, and I think that people identified with that so much. You know, when you're an adolescent and a teenager and you're confused, all you want is not to feel alone. Give me your hands. You're not alone. So all of that stuff was real reassuring to people that were confused, you know. And,
what about his relationship with Mick Jagger? You actually walked in on them one time?
Well, I came back from the airport. I'd come in from New York, and I walked into the house, and I said to Daniela, I said, put the kettle on. I said, it was the red eye. I thought I was going to die. And she said, oh, Mick and David are upstairs. And I said, oh, okay, I'll see what they want. I knew David wanted coffee, but I didn't know what Mick drank. And I walked up into the bedroom, and I said, what do you guys want? I'm home. We're making tea and coffee. Mick, do you want tea? And I walked out of the room, and I went downstairs and made tea and coffee. And Howard Stern and Joan Rivers asked me that question. Well, it was a question which I had been asked before, and the story was all over London 15 years ago, but it caused an awful lot of excitement. So, yeah, walked in on them. I walked in and asked what they wanted for breakfast.
Wait, I have to tell you what David's saying now.
Jumping in. So,
Good, Janet, jump in,
Can
babe.
I tell you, I think he wants to take some of those stories back, because the last thing I heard, he was telling people in that situation, when you walked in, that he and Mick were actually in bed with two groupies, and they hid them in another room. And that's what he's telling people now.
To hide them, darling. It was my house in Oakley Street. And they probably did have a bunch of groupies because they had a bunch of affairs with a particular young lady who was singing backup vocals for David. But taking them back, why would I take them back, Janet, if they're, I mean...
No, not you. I said he's backtracking and trying to explain that and make it sound like it wasn't Mick Jagger that he was having an affair with.
Well, I don't think it's a question of having an affair. You could get drunk and pass out.
No, it's just anything could have happened. You don't really know.
You know what I mean? Everyone always makes these wild assumptions, and it makes me wonder how very sort of moral majority, you know, we get sometimes.
Two girls hidden in another room, though?
Pardon me?
Do you think he had two girls hidden in the bathroom or something?
There wasn't a bathroom off of my bedroom.
Okay.
Let's take a phone call. Go ahead, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
I think actors and musicians are here to entertain us, and we should stay out of their private lives.
What do you have to say about that, Angela? You just wrote the book, and actually Janet could comment on that, too. You write about them for a living. Angela, why don't you jump in here? Well,
I don't write about them for a living.
No, I said Janet wrote about them for a living. But...
well, I think that people's privacy is very important to them, and if they want to have a very private life, then stay out of show business and stay off stage.
Yeah, and if you couldn't write about their private lives, Janet, you wouldn't have a job.
I agree. I think fans want to know a lot about their favorite stars. They really want to know what they're doing. They want to know, and they're buying the records. They're making these people rich, so let's tell them.
How about idle speculation, though, that does lead to rumors that tend to become nasty sometimes and negative?
That goes with the territory.
That, too.
Oh, come on. You know it does. I mean, Janet, what do you think?
It's part of show business. I think that, you know, if you're smart, you can separate the truth from the fiction.
You can be a blue-collar worker if you can't take the heat.
Right. Yeah, you shouldn't be in show business if you can't take a little abuse.
Up next, we're going to find out how Madonna keeps her youthful looks, Janet knows, and her answer may very well surprise you. We'll be back.
Angela Bowie is talking to us about her life with her ex-husband, David Bowie, and you had a son, Zoe Bowie. Mm-hmm. And you said you had Zoe for David?
Yeah.
Why? Explain to me why you would have a son for somebody else as opposed to the two of you having a child together.
Because David played with other people's children a lot, and his father had been the PR man for Dr. Bernardo's, which is an orphanage organization that specializes in adoption in England. And I just, I watched him, and being an actor, I spend a lot of time watching people to find out their motivation. I suppose that's why I was able to be creative director and manage him well. And I just thought that it would be a good thing, you know, and it would give him some kind of grounding.
Do you see him now, Zoe?
I saw him up until he was 14, which is about 7 years ago. I talked to him 2 years ago at Valentine's Day and just before he took his finals at Gordonston. But I haven't seen him. We had a fight when he was 14.
What happened?
Well, I said something which I shouldn't have said about someone that had looked after him, and it was, I regretted it as soon as I said it. I referred to them and their being overweight and basically that they were undisciplined and, you know, the type of things that you don't say.
But it was severed for good?
He got very mad. He got very mad. He took it as you know, an injustice, the type of thing that one should not say. And he wrote me a letter and said he didn't want to come and spend the vacations anymore.
Has this been hard on you, not to have him closer to you in part of your life? Yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, I'm a colonel's daughter, and...
but it's your kid.
Some things are hard. Yeah. It's like the story of Solomon and the baby.
Will you get back together, do you think?
Of course. You know, the only person you can really be mad at and know that it'll all be all right in the end is your mother. So I don't know how long it'll take, but, you know, I have a daughter who's 12 called Sasha who makes my heart shine and makes me smile. So, you know, I have someone to put all that maternal focus on.
What do you think about David's recent marriage to supermodel Iman?
I don't know her. Everything I've seen and the work of hers that I've seen in Star Trek VI and stuff like that has been marvelous work, so I really don't know.
No twinge of jealousy or anything like that when you think about
A twinge of jealousy?
Yeah, in any way.
Oh, my dear, you need to really read the book. No, I would
feel
never.
Anything about?
I would never be anything but thrilled for the people that I've had relationships with if they feel that they can go that route. I can't. I could never devote my life to one person again. I devote my life to my daughter and to things that I can cope with on that kind of level.
But in the book, I wonder why you don't see David. You talked about it's been a long time since you have seen him, and does that bother you in any way, not communicating with him now?
No. It would bother me if we'd been able to sustain the friendship. Then I would feel upset because it's like, you know, when a friend doesn't call you. But it was such an abrupt cut, you know, when we got divorced and when we started not being able to really communicate with each other, that no, it's not a part of it at all.
Let's take a question from the audience. Jason, go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering if David's called you or said anything or any lawsuits or anything since the book?
No.
Has he commented in any way, Angela? About the book that you know of?
No.
Yeah.
No, not at all. But, you know, it would be a strange thing to do because the book is not anything but the truth, and it's also extremely full of admiration and praise for David. You know what I mean? Because when you go through the type of exciting period of time, I can only look at it and laugh because the book that I'm working on now, Tales of Joy, which is the story of the rest of my life, is 1,000 times more exciting. I mean, it's kind of hack all that old rock and roll scandal and gossip, but that's what the publishers want.